Higher yields require high-performance crop nutrition. Through fusion technology, MicroEssentials is designed to increase nutrient uptake throughout the growing cycle. The unique chemical composition of MicroEssentials creates an acid zone around each granule. Lowering the pH promotes the formation of dihydrogen orthophosphate, a more readily available form of phosphate, resulting in increased nutrient uptake. With MicroEssentials SZ, plants more efficiently take up zinc because each nutritionally balanced granule delivers zinc evenly across the field. MicroEssentials also contains small elemental sulfur particles designed for faster oxidation to sulfate and increased uptake. The proof is in the performance. Research shows that plants take up nutrients more efficiently with MicroEssentials compared to traditional fertilizer blends, resulting in higher yields and higher profitability.
And we're excited to have you here at the show this year. You may recall we had the show last year, but a little bit different circumstances under COVID. I would like to remind our folks, we also are streaming online. You can go to our social media channels or yourliveevent.com, and you can find each of our feeds that we're doing through all our seminars here at the Big Iron Farm Show. As mentioned, I'm Don Wick from the Red River Farm Network. I'd like to plug our team if I could. You heard Randy Coonan doing the markets. We have Kara Hart, Megan Overby, Jay Rader, and Collin Wick is on her way, as I believe. So we have the whole team here and ready to bring you up to date on what's happening at Big Iron. We're excited about this panel. What did you call it? Dynamic duo earlier when we were getting ready for this. Of course, we have two great people to talk farm policy this morning. I don't think you find anybody better. Collin Peterson, of course, represented the 7th District for 30 years and former chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and you went through, what, 3 farm bills during that time period?
Well, when I was leader, yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually 4 or 5 when I was a junior member, you know, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, right. And Bill Northey, Bill and I go way back. He was president of the National Corn Growers Association 25 years ago.
5 years ago, yeah.
He went on to be the Secretary of Agriculture in the great state of Iowa and served as Undersecretary during the Trump administration, and we're excited to have both of you here. Let's just talk, Collin, maybe to kick things off, reflecting back on 30 years. Give me an idea what your reflections are on that time period and really how politics changed over those 30 years.
Well, there's no comparison today with what it was like when I started in 1991. And we went through a lot of stuff over the years. I've kind of seen it all, from the contract with America, and the Gingrich Revolution, and everything in between. And, you know, people ask me, do I miss, you know, being in Washington? Do I miss, you know, what I was doing? And I said, you know, not what I really miss is what it was like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's never going to be like that again. You know, it's just different. And so I would have not been a very good fit for the politics of today. You know, I was getting tougher every time. Every farm bill, it became more partisan. The committee changed so much, especially on our side of the aisle. And I was able to hold it together, you know, through 2018, but I don't know. I don't know how I would operate in the climate that's going on right now. So, in a way, I tell people, well, I'm better off being out of there. I'm not sure you're better off.
I remember the last farm bill, and I was at one of your hearings, and I looked out in that at the committee, and so many, particularly on the Democratic side of the aisle, represented places like New York or Baltimore or Atlanta, not traditionally farm country, so it was a little different, I think, for me to experience.
Yeah, you know, and that's really been a problem. We could not get enough Democratic members to sign on to the committee. So we had to go out and actually draft people, you know, and unfortunately the Ag Committee is not something that's sought out because it's not seen as a power place. You can't raise as much money and that sort of thing. And so we, you know, we only had, I think we only had 12 or 13 permanent members on the Democratic side in the 18 Farm Bill out of, at that time, out of 26. Now they only have 7 permanent members out of 29 members. The rest of them are on there on waivers. They're not building seniority and that sort of thing. So it's a problem. And you've got nobody, they're good people, but they just don't have a farm constituency. You got Angie Craig, who's now also temporary, but she's one of the better members on the committee because she's really done her homework. She's
From Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, she's from, you know, the southern part of the cities. She's got 4 counties that are ag counties. You got Cindy Axney in Iowa. She's got Des Moines, and she's got, what, 6 counties to the southwest of Des Moines?
Probably bigger than that, but yeah, it was certainly biggest population area is Des Moines,
Yeah, Des
but
Moines.
she
So-
has a lot of
So the
rural
folks that are, Sherry Bustos has, probably the most farm district of any Democrat that's left, and she's now retiring, because she almost got beat last time, and she figured you probably can't win again. So one of the biggest problems we have in agriculture is there are no Democrats left in farm districts. And this is a problem, because you can't do anything with one party.
Right.
It just doesn't work. It doesn't stick. And we've been able to keep the Ag Committee bipartisan. We've worked together, and Conaway and I had our problems, but at the end of the day, we made it work. And I'm not sure it's going to be that easy to do going forward.
Bill, from your experience as undersecretary, we always think of that bipartisanship in agriculture and rural issues. Did you see that in your work?
Yeah, I really did feel that way, and so obviously Collin and I worked together a lot and worked with Senator Hoeven a lot as well. We had state secretaries of ag, there were Republicans and Democrats, we worked across the aisle. We were there, they were there, and it was time to get stuff done. And so for the most part, yes, I do think the struggle in ag in general is there's fewer of us, and sometimes we just assume good things will happen, and they don't always happen. We need to be able to have a strong voice. We need to be able to make it, make sure that people understand agriculture. I mean, I was just watching a football game the other day, actually a really sad game, Iowa State game. I went Iowa State, or it wasn't a tough. But one of the announcers was talking about, I don't understand this field corn versus sweet corn thing. There's a whole lot of folks out there that don't know all the things that we understand about agriculture, and it's easy on policy to end up trying to do the right things and do the wrong things if they don't. And so we need to be strong, we need to be bipartisan, and we need to be able to make sure that folks know what the right things are from the agriculture point of view.
In fact, you two are working together on a project. Can you shed some light on that?
Well, so this came about because of, I got a call from Combest Shell, which is a lobby firm that was created by Larry Combest, who was chairman of the Ag Committee in 2002 when we did the Farm Bill. And then he retired in 2004, and so Tom Sell was his chief of staff on the committee, so they formed this lobby firm in 2005. And at the time, Chuck Grassley, who's a good friend of mine and a good friend of Bill's, one of the things that he's always after is these payment limitations. So he had a bill to put a $50,000 payment limitation on every, entity. And the Southerners, this was a big threat to the Southerners, because like peanuts have a double payment limit and all this kind of stuff. And so the farm businesses in the Southwest decided we better come together with a coalition to defeat this. And so out of that came the Southwest Council on Agribusiness. And so they've been operating ever since. And prior to that, there was a Delta Council that's still operating in the Delta, basically Mississippi. And these guys have been so successful because they have come together as a region and come together with one voice, and are able to speak to 12 senators and 60 congressmen with one voice. When you got people that don't know what you're talking about, and they hear 10 different things from 10 different commodity groups, they just kind of say, what the heck, So it's important, to do a coalition. So we're creating a Midwest Council on Agriculture that's going to be Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And we're in the process of getting that organized. We've got about 15 members signed up so far, and we're going to hope to have this filled out by the end of the year. The idea is for us to come forward with the main issues that affect this part of the world. And hopefully we can be as strong as cotton and peanuts and rice, because those guys have eaten our lunch, policy-wise. And one of the reasons is because they understand politics, they put money into politics, they put time into politics, and they pay attention. And we, on the other hand, say, well, we're for good government and we'll just hope that everything's going to work out. Well, that doesn't always work, work that way. So we're in the process of putting this together. Bill is helping me. We think we bring a good team. Myself on the legislative side, congressional side, Bill having good experience within USDA and also within one of the commodity groups and within the Secretary of Agriculture's, which are at the state level are important groups. So I think we bring something to the table here that's worthwhile. You know, I was thinking about just kind of hanging it up. I'd had enough, 30 years, you know, fighting in my battles, but I was convinced, and I guess I feel like I still have something to offer. People still listen to me, and, you know, so we're going to try to get this thing going, and Bill has been gracious enough to work with me. He and I have had some real successes together. When the sugar beet industry up here was under fire, we fixed it. And that was not an easy thing to do.
No.
You know, we still have some scars over that. So we've been able to work together, and we hope that we can bring this coalition to an outcome here and go to the next farm bill with one voice from the Midwest that's going to be successful. And I just say, it's not just farm policy. This is going to be tax policy, going to be waters of the U.S., going to be these other things that are a big threat to agriculture. We're going to take on all of those issues, not just the farm bill. We just had a big success by defeating the stepped-up basis, and a number of us, I put out an op-ed, Max Bacchus put out an op-ed, Blanche Lincoln, former chairman in the Senate, and Heidi Heitkamp. All Democrats came out and said to the Democratic Party, do not do this, and they listened. And that was a big win.
That's dead at this point then, the stepped-up base?
At this point, yep, I don't think there's any appetite to bring that up. They've dropped it out of the House bill. Richie Neal, who's the chairman over there, who's a good friend of mine, one of the things that I've been able to do is pick who's going to be the chairman and get on the right side of these fights. So I was on the right side of Richie Neal, on the right side of Frank Pallone, you know, Nancy Pelosi, which helps you, you know, in the future. So Richie, I've helped him over the years. I've talked to him about these farm tax policies in terms of agriculture. He knows I'm a CPA, that I used to do tax work. He listened to me, and I think that's part of why we had a good outcome out of this.
Bill, from your perspective as a farmer and being in the administration and such, what do you think that impact on stepped-up basis would be in estate taxes in some of those areas that they have been looking at?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple. One is be a huge impact to small businesses, to agriculture out here. As you look at transitioning from one generation to another, you look at how our land prices have gone up, it's still a piece of ground. In fact, it's a smaller piece of most of our operations than it used to be. You know, quarter section used to be a big part of our operation. Now it's not a lot, and it can be, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And so it really was a tax on inflation, and it would have been a bad thing. Then I think one of the things that you appealed to, too, was it'd be a terrible thing for the Democrats politically. I just think the pushback was so strong. It's important to be able to share that, and I would argue that's one of those benefits of a coalition. They can come together and say, hey, let's break this complex issue down. Let's not talk about whether it impacts 4% or 14% or 24% of the folks out there. Let's just say this is going to be bad for real family farmers, real small businesses. It's going to be terrible for you politically. Don't do it. And good policy at the end can come together around that. Certainly around that Southwest coalition, we both had them come and visit. They came to USDA and visited us and talked about issues that were important to the Southwest. They went to the Hill, and when they can come together and say these issues are most important, it helps the administration, it helps policymakers focus on a handful of things and say, okay, if this is going to make you all happy, we can do this. But if you're all going to come to me and I'm supposed to sort out 7 different solutions, that's really hard on a policymaker, when they're also trying to figure out Medicare and trade policy and everything else out there. So,
you know, we have the strongest lobby in D.C. in agriculture with the sugar industry. they have got this figured out, and they have clearly the most strong lobby, you know, of anybody in the country. But that's just sugar, you know, and we're going to support sugar, and we're going to make sure that they continue to be successful, but it's got to be more than that. You can't just, you know, have a successful sugar lobby. You know, we grow corn and soybeans and canola and wheat, and, you know, we have dairy farms and hogs and all this other stuff, you know, that are just as important, you know, in different parts of this district. So, you know, so we're not going to undermine what's there, because that's important, and those messages need to be out there, but it's going to be much bigger than that, and it's going to bring everybody together, so, and pick the fights that are the most important. This taxing was very important. Waters of the U.S. is very important. There's certain things like that that we just need to weigh in on.
I would tell folks we have mics out in the audience. If folks have any questions, give us a wave, and our broadcaster will get a microphone in front of you. You talked about that $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill. We're getting $1 trillion. That's a lot more zeros than I'm used to. It encompasses a lot, everything from climate to ag research to energy. There's a whole lot of things in this bill. I guess I'm not even knowledgeable what they all are. Are they really being vetted compared to what you do when you're going through a farm bill process with all the hearings and the testimony that you'd have in a farm bill?
Well, most of what's in there is not going to open up the farm bill. Well, it isn't, because the conservation title was not brought up in the markup. The reason was they figured out that they couldn't add conservation without upsetting the budget rules and without opening up the conservation title. So that's one of the reasons they decided to do it in rules instead of where they did. So, you know, I'm one of those that thinks this is way over the top. We have spent so damn much money already, you know, trying to deal with this pandemic, you know, some of which I personally had some questions about, but, you know, they pumped money in the economy, they kept people going, you know, but at some point, you know, I think we've spent $4 or $5 trillion at this point. I just don't see how you spend another $3.5 trillion. I think what's going on here, the Democrats are reacting to what happened to them in 2009, 2010. When they had the White House, they had the Senate, they had the House, and they squandered it. And not only did they get nothing done, they lost the majority on top of it. And I think what they've decided is we're not going to do that again. So we're going to figure out a way that we can come together to get as much done as we can of our priorities, and with the understanding we probably won't be back in the majority in the next Congress. I think that's really what's decided here. And, you know, some of the things that are in there are probably, you know, problems for a lot of people in this country. Child care, you know, family leave. Those kinds of things are a big problem for working families that are trying to figure out how to survive. You know, we got two people working, and what do you do with the kids, especially with the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't know how we need to do this bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's $1.5 trillion. That stuff needs to get done. As farmers, we need that bill, you know, for roads and bridges and waterways and all that kind of stuff. So that's got to be done, you know. And my own view of looking what's in that bill, I might be able to swallow another $1.5 trillion above that. But if I were in Congress, I would not support going to $3.5 trillion. I just don't think we can afford it. And I think I agree with Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema and those kind of people that are saying, wait a minute. So we'll see what they do. I don't think they'll get $3.5 trillion. I think they'll probably get $1.5 trillion and the infrastructure bill. And I think it will pass because the Democrats have to do this. You know, they feel like they have to do this in order to have something in the next election. You know, especially reacting to what happened back in 2009, 2010. I don't know what Bill thinks, but...
Yeah, you know, I think your question of, are they looking at every piece? I don't think you can be when you're looking at this big a pile. You know, you say, is it is $54 billion the right number, or $49 billion? They don't even know what they're going to spend it on. It's hard to figure that out in a $3.5 trillion program. And mind you, at USDA, we had some trade relief and some coronavirus relief. We spent some money. But we had justification for all those pieces. We knew what people we thought were losing. We were only making up part of that. I mean, those were the losses for trade and coronavirus for our farmers, and that's how we did direct payments. But certainly, if you look at the conversation that happens in a farm bill, 2018, you're scraping over every last $100,000 or smaller amounts of money, every pilot program. And now we're talking about whether it's $3.5 trillion or $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion here or there.
That's real money.
It really does.
Well, the farmers get, between conservation and farm programs, get about, $12 billion out of the farm bill a year. $12 billion. And that's like 1% of a trillion, right? So we got 3 trillion,
Yeah.
it's like
1%.
0.3% is what we're getting out of the farm bill, compared to what they're trying to spend. If I was chairman of the committee and they tried to give me $1 billion of extra money, I'm not sure what I'd do with it. I just think you'd end up doing stuff that probably doesn't need to be done or, shouldn't be done.
We got a question out in the audience?
I just want to clarify, I want to take a few steps back. You talked about that Midwest Council on Agriculture. Is that mostly agriculture groups that you're hoping is part of that, or are you hoping lawmakers have a hand in that too?
Well, we're going to have, the base of it is going to be agribusiness. So the people that we've got now are bankers, farm credit, machinery dealers, crop insurance, seed dealers, folks, hogs. We had a couple big private hog operations. So, some bigger farmers. So that's initial basis. We're going to bring in the commodity groups, but that's not going to be the basis of what we're doing. The basis is we're going to be kind of like the NF by B of farmers in the Midwest. We're going to have our own little logo that you'll be able to put up in your window that says that you're a member of the Midwest Council. So we're going to bring all those things to the table. It's not going to be what's good for corn growers, what's good for sugar beets, what's good for soybeans, what's good for cattle. That's going to be part of it. But they already have their lobbyists, and they're already doing a pretty good job of lobbying Congress. What's not happening is nobody's bringing this all together and looking at the big picture. And as I said, you're talking to somebody in the committee, and this is on both sides of the aisle. We don't have a single person on the Ag Committee that's got a direct connection to agriculture anymore. The only guy, maybe Jim Costa, did some dairy farming way back when. Now he's got an almond farmer. But most of them have no connection. So it's not like the old days. And so you go in and you talk to these folks, and all they know is what they're hearing. And as I said earlier, if you hear 10 different things, so if the people, the commodity groups in Minnesota come into your office, and they've all got different priorities, and you're telling them these different things, and at some point they just say, I don't know what you guys are talking, tell me what is most important. And we hope that that's what the Midwest Council will cut through and sort through all of this stuff. Like I said, we don't want to undermine sugar beets or corn or any of these other commodities, but we want to bring the power of this region. We are a huge economic engine in this part of the world. I've told people, if you didn't have sugar beets in the Red River Valley, you'd lose 20% of the business in the Red River Valley, in my opinion, because of all the stuff that comes off of it. So we want to be part of that bigger picture.
Right.
Thank you.
So you went through a rather lengthy process to get through the confirmation, and your nomination was held up when you were in the whole gamut. We're still waiting for a lot of names out there. We finally yesterday they named an chief ag trade negotiator at USDA president of the Almond Association out of California, as I understand, former deputy ag secretary in California. We're still waiting like for FSA, the state execs. What's your take on this lengthy holdup? Is this normal, or what's your thoughts?
I don't know what normal is. We were slow, too. The secretary at this time, Secretary Perdue, didn't have any confirmed members of his sub-cabinet yet either. I would have just been named as a candidate. It was Labor Day weekend. You know, you always say if you want to bury news, you do it late on a 3-day weekend on a Friday night. That's when I was announced. I don't know that it's anything to do with it was embarrassing to the president or not, but anyway, that's when I was announced. And then I would have been potentially confirmed in August. I was actually confirmed the following March. It seems slow. They still have FSA administrators to be, or FSA state executive directors, but some of those didn't come in until October or December for us either. So we'll see how that timing works. It feels, in some ways, it feels a little more empty too, because some of them aren't there either. They're not in DC. We're not able to go and visit the handful that are there. Just DC and COVID has impacted kind of the whole feel for things. And then some of the issues that are being talked about are not necessarily meat and potato kind of ag issues, you know, really out of USDA right now. They're certainly talking about drought, and they're talking about how to help folks, but a lot around equity and climate and some of those other issues, and a lot of ag folks want to weigh in on those, and it's hard to find folks to do that with right now as well.
One of the other issues that the administration's been focused on here in recent weeks has been the area of competition. You know, looking at what's going on in the meatpacking business, and it's probably just one of many sectors that are being looked at this point. Collin, do you see that there's ways to bring more transparency to the marketplace? But you know,
Well, we have transparency, basically. The problem is, to be honest with you, I don't think people in America want to be in this business. You know, they've sold this to the Chinese, to the Brazilians. They're the majority owners of the meat processing in the United States. And that is not a good situation, you know. And I know why they're doing it. I know the Chinese are doing this. They bought Smithfield so they could figure out how to modernize their hog situation. That's why they did it. You know, and it's just a messy business. You know, it's not popular. You got all kinds of people after you for different reasons. And I think a lot of people look at this and just say, why do I want to be in this business? You know, so what we decided to do, I don't have a lot of confidence you're going to do anything substantial with all this antitrust stuff and so forth. I've never seen anything come out of that, you know, other than probably negative. So what we did is we said, okay, Frank Lucas and I, we've been working since '94 to put money into the system to try to encourage small processors to start up. And so I've been working with a couple of situations where we're trying to start a USDA federally inspected processing plant. You know, and that's what's needed. You know, ideally, if we could get somebody to do 1,000 head a week, which is a small plant, right, it'd be a big deal out here. You know, well, we've been looking at like 100 head a week, trying to get somebody started into this space. So you got some alternative where you can sell your animals if you're in the fat cattle business, you know, for example. But it's hard to get started. And it's hard to convince people to finance it. It's just a tough situation. But they announced $500 million of money to help get these started. But you hear this, $500 million, you know, when we're talking about, you know, $50 billion for conservation or for climate change or whatever. I mean, if you really want to do something, you should be putting $50 billion into processing.
Right.
You know, if you want to actually make something happen, you know. So, I don't know, we'll see what comes out of it. I think there'll be a lot of talk, a lot of smoke and mirrors, and not a lot of action would be my guess, you know.
There are some, on the hog side, some producer-owned plants, Iowa, they're looking at Pipestone Group working in Sioux Falls, trying to develop something down there. Is there a model there that could make something happen?
I think there is, and there are a few of those kind of specialty plants on the cattle side too, but really hogs have done it better. Cattle plants are expensive. That whole meat business is tough to break into, and then sometimes they make money for 5 years in a row, and then they don't make any money for 5 years in a row. And do you have enough to carry you through? So I think it's very important because we've seen some real ugly the last 3 years, especially in the cattle side, where the farmers have been left out and we've had huge margins. And so I think I think big processors should expect a political response to that. They're going to get it. I don't know if it's going to fix anything, but they absolutely should get scrutiny into what's going on, and maybe that'll make them behave a little bit better. I don't know what that looks like. We do need some competition as well.
So the pandemic created this situation, because what happened is you had these plants shut down because the people got sick, and we had a big problem down south, and I had to go down to Worthington, got JBS to reconfigure that plant so they were killing pigs so we could take them to the rendering plant instead of marketing them. And Smithfield wouldn't do it. But what happened is you had a situation where you constricted the processing, and on the other hand, and so all of a sudden there's less place for you to sell your animals. And on the other end, the consumers started buying more beef and pork and whatever, and because there was a limited supply because the plants were shut down. So you got the perfect economic storm where you have a limited supply and the unlimited demand, and what happens? And so I think some of these beef processing plants, I heard, were making $1,800 a head, which is unreal. Because Cargill, for a while, they were operating, if they could make $70 a head, they would think they were doing good. So I'm taking this to a financing thing where people want to get into this business, and I tell them, well, they're making $1,800 a head. Those bankers don't believe it, because they also know when they were losing money, as Bill said. So it's a tough thing, and I feel sorry for the independent people, but, this Midwest Council, we have Christensen Farms, we have John Schwartz, two big operators down south that have joined, that have gone in, and they've actually created their own processing with their own money, if you will, and that's kind of what has to happen. But they've got the wherewithal to do this. If you're somebody out there with a couple hundred head of cattle, you're not going to be able to do much, so it's tough. But if they're going to throw away all this money, I just think I'd put $50 billion into processing myself.
Switching gears, climate obviously is getting a lot of attention these days. Carbon, everything, carbon taxes. Is there an opportunity for farmers, or is this a regulatory challenge for farmers? How do you see this whole take?
Well, you tell me what the price of carbon is. So before you can answer that question, somebody has to figure out what in the hell this is worth. And I cannot find anybody to tell me with any specificity how to price this stuff. Nobody knows. And nobody knows how much carbon can be sequestered by whatever crop, how long it stays there. It's all smoke and mirrors. And so I've been telling these commodity groups and other folks, you got to figure out how much your crop is sequestering carbon. And, in order for us to be able to figure out how to do this, and some people are starting to look at this, but what I'm afraid is going to happen is there's all these people in Congress that want to do something about this. And they want to throw money at it. And what I'm afraid they're going to do is they're going to come up with some artificial price for carbon. And they're going to come up with some ideological idea about how to do it that doesn't have any basis in science. And they're going to spend a whole bunch of money and not accomplish a damn thing. That's what I'm worried about, and that it puts us behind the 8 ball, So I don't know what Bill thinks, but.
I think that could absolutely be right. I do think the temptation for somebody like in my situation and the farmers I talk to is to say, hey, the politics changed, now it's just about carbon, it's all politically driven. But I think it's bigger than that. I think there's consumers, there's investors, there's business folks that are trying to figure it out, and I think really government's better off letting some of that figure it out. Now, we don't yet know whether consumers are willing to pay or how much companies are willing to pay or what that carbon looks like, but the discussion around sustainability is something more than just Congress or the administration, even though they're talking about it a lot more than they used to. It's also happening in the business community. You have companies, that's one of the things that I'm working with, some companies that I came back and I said, what are you working on? What are you interested in? And they said, we're trying to figure out how we answer some of our customers on sustainability. How do we work with farmers? And said, if you're looking for answers, I don't have them, but I can work through them with you, and that's what we're doing. And they feel like this is going to be something we're going to be talking about for, you know, for the future. Now, whether that looks like a $10 an acre carbon credit for sequestering carbon, I don't know. I really think it probably looks like somebody at an ethanol plant saying, I want your low carbon corn, this is the math you do on your farm, I can sell it for more money in California through low carbon ethanol, and maybe that's true on low carbon pork or low carbon beef too. If they can, more power to them. I think then it's an opportunity. I do think there's a little bit of a land rush feel, and that's always scary. We've seen some of those land rushes come, and a lot of them don't have anything at the end of the rainbow that they say they're going to have. And right now, a lot of folks are just talking about a rainbow and how easy it's going to be. I think it's going to be hard. And I think there's going to be lots of solutions. And I think the solutions in potatoes is different than the solutions in corn. Frito-Lay is going to be different than ADM. And so we have to figure out how that plays out over time. But I don't think it's just a flash in a pan and we can just forget about it. I think it is something that folks are going to keep caring about.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. If I can tell you this, if they're going to pay you $10 an acre or $20 an acre for carbon, it's not going to work.
That's not enough.
You know, it's just not going to work. Farmers aren't going to do it. You know, and I've been telling people, Robert Bonney, who's going to be the next Bill Northey, he's going to be the undersecretary for the same portfolio Bill had. A very good guy.
Good guy.
I'm sure you know about him.
Yep. Yep.
And, you know, I've had a lot of discussions with him about what he intends to do, and he gives me all the right answers. You know, we're not going to mandate anything. We're not going to do anything that doesn't make economic sense. We're going to listen to the producers. I hope that's true. But I also hear this other group out there, like the AOCs of the world, that want a Green New Deal and so forth, you know, that they're just hell-bent to spend money, even if they don't know what they're doing, just because they can say they did something, you know. So that's what I worry about, that they might stick something into this reconciliation at the end of the day, because, frankly, I think the way this is heading, they're going to have more trouble with AOCs of the world than they are with the Joe Manchins, because they're going to complain they're not, in Bernie Sanders, they're not going to vote for it because they're not getting all this stuff that they want at $6 trillion, you know. So I just worry about what they're going to stick in there at the end, and hopefully it won't be something that backfires on us, and that's what I worry about.
Collin, I think you mentioned earlier WOTUS, and we know the consternation we've had particularly in the prairie pothole region. During the Trump years, we changed to the navigable waters, trying to tweak things a bit. Now there's a court in Arizona last month that vacated the navigable waters. What's that mean really for farmers and ranchers as we take a look at some of the wetland issues and such that we've had?
I don't think anybody knows at this point. I mean, it's up in the air. I thought this was settled law, that we had decided that now, you know, that it would only apply to navigable waters, and which meant rivers, streams, so forth. Did not apply to every pothole out there, or you know, and you know, it went in a different direction. I think partly because of my good friend Jim Oberstar, who is he was there with Blatnick, then when they created this Clean Water Act way back in '73, he was a staffer. And they put this language into the Clean Water Act. And then it was interpreted to mean what we all thought it meant, and when it got down to this Waters of the U.S. thing, Jim Oberstar sticks his hand up and says, well, no, we meant this to apply to everything. We meant this to apply to any water, and that's where the Democrats headed in that direction, see? And it's just not workable. I mean, it's just, you talk about a nightmare. And I tell people, in my opinion, some of these folks that have pushed this ideology on wetlands have done more to harm wetlands than anybody else, because they go all extreme and they don't know what they're talking about and they don't know what they're doing, and it creates a backlash. You got people draining wetlands just because out of spite, So it's, hopefully we can keep this centered. I've been talking to people about this. Don't bring that up again. You got enough trouble in politics on the Democratic side without getting involved in that.
I agree. I think the only thing this is good for is lawyers, because they'll fight it out in court, and they all pick their place. And I personally, I'm biased. I thought the navigable water rule was the right rule. I knew the guy who put it together. He put it together. He thought it was bulletproof at Office of Water, and it made sense. But for us to change every election and then make it uncertain. So I think folks right now are saying, what is the law right now? What do we comply with? I think agencies wonder, what do they enforce right now? If we don't have the Trump rule, certainly don't have the WOTUS.
So we have to go back to the 70s?
We have to go back to the 70s, but the reason we had the stuff after that is because we didn't know what the 70s meant either.
The problem is people don't agree with what that meant, see? So it's anybody's guess where this is going to go. It's not good,
I do think there is a sensitivity within the administration now, and not like I have any knowledge of that, but that they saw what happened at the Obama
backlash,
rule. That was a disaster. That was a political disaster. It was a regulatory disaster, and I don't think they want to go back that far. So whatever the change is, I don't think the alternative is the Obama rule, the waters of the U.S. I don't think that's the alternative, but to me, the best alternative is the navigable water rule that we just had, and then let's live with the darn thing. I think it had a lot of protections, and then states have their own protections. We don't need the federal government to protect every drop of water out here. We have other agencies that do it, and then let's settle that and then figure out if there's some places that are going wrong.
Collin, you were a huge advocate for CRP. We're seeing a gradual increase in acreages there as far as the cap and such.
Well,
do you see an incentive for CRP in this market environment, or?
Well, it's a very complicated question. I had lunch yesterday with Greg Page, who used to be the CEO of Cargill. He was retired, but anyway, so he asked me, he says, how many acres of 190, how many acres of land that produce 190 bushels of corn should be in the CRP? And I shocked him. I said, 0. What we need to do with CRP is what I've been advocating forever, and we can't get there. And that is, take the land that shouldn't be farmed out of put that into CRP, and make sure that the land that should be farmed is not in CRP. And we have not been able to do that. In my opinion, because of the EBI and the way that was put together over the last 30 years, with all these groups in there lobbying and putting in their little perks and all this kind of stuff, it made it so it doesn't work. You don't get anything out of it except a big muddle, and these groups that want to have this and that, they can go and pick it out, but you're not getting an overall policy that makes sense. And we have, in my opinion, 40 million acres of land in this country that should not be farmed. And what we need to do is figure out how to identify that and get that in the CRP. And there is nothing better to sequester carbon in agriculture than CRP. Nothing takes as much carbon out of the air and puts it in the ground for as long a period of time as CRP. It does more than trees, because trees are too slow growing and whatever. But we haven't been able to figure out how to do this. And so in the last Farm Bill, I was trying to put a cap of 85% of the rental value in your county on the CRP. So we didn't get the good land going in. Stabenow fought me. We ended up at 90%. So that became the law. And we also eliminated what's called the SIPs and PIPs, which were the incentives that the Secretary used to get people to go into the program. So we were paying people 100% of the establishment cost of native prairie, which was $600 an acre. And these farmers were doing it because the government paid for it, you know? So I said, we got to change that. So we put in there that the farmer has come up with 50%. Well, I'll guarantee you that no farmer is going to pay $300 an acre to put this stuff in, you know. And so what happened? The Secretary came up with a way to get around it. And now he's back paying people because he couldn't get them to go into the program. And, you know, I wouldn't have a problem with that if this was land that actually should be in CRP, but it's not. It's land that's owned by somebody that wants to quit farming and doesn't want to sell it or doesn't want to rent it or whatever. This is not what it should be. So, again, we need to have a way to identify the land that belongs and the land that doesn't. In my opinion, we need to get rid of the EBI completely and start over. And we need to have, you know, simplify these covers. You know, you're going to have just as good a cover for pheasants if you have brome grass and alfalfa, you know, as you do $600 an acre native prairie. We need to figure out what makes economic sense. So I think the prices have solved the problem for the time being for people that want to limit CRP. You know, we just saw 4 million acres offered. They only brought in about 2 million. Mm-hmm. And I just did an interview Friday with a guy who wanted to know what happened. I said, well, a lot of things, but I think the main thing is the price of corn and soybeans is why you're not getting the sign up, you know. So I don't know what Bill thinks.
Yep.
But.
You know, it's tough to get CRP rental rates right? When prices are going down, you're basing rental rates on what they were 2 years ago. And so everything the government is paying looks high. And so you end up with more acres in CRP. And then the opposite happens. When prices are going up, rental rates are going up, but you still have that low price government rental rate for CRP. And so we should expect less acres going in right now. That's okay. You shouldn't artificially make it such that you're getting those acres and you can do things that mess that up. In fact, one of the things, they took the cap off the good ground. The cap was already off the poor ground, so we actually end up with some incentives for better ground to get into CRP in the latest round. So it's a tough thing to get right. It's a good program. It's hard to get right. Conservation is tough to get right every place in the country, right? You know, stuff that looks great in one area is not the great ground in another area. It's hard to get the environmental numbers right and the benefits index right in all areas. I think we should expect it to be tough right now to get land into CRP because we have great incentive to produce crops. But still, some land went back into CRP. Those are not bad numbers, even though they're a lot smaller than the numbers that the administration had as a goal.
So they just exceeded the sign up on the grassland reserve, which is encouraging. And Frank Lucas and I have been pushing that for a number of years because they'll pay you so much an acre just to keep it in pasture. So you don't have to have any special thing, you can just keep it in pasture, you can graze it, you can hay it, you know, and why people weren't signing up for that, but we improved it some and we got 2.5 million acres into grassland, which was about 1 million more than they expected. So that's a positive thing. On the other end, on the CRP, we've been working to open them up to cattle. And so now you can run cattle on CRP all the time. And that's the best thing you can do with it. It's better than burning, it's better than mowing, it's better than anything else you can do. Put cattle on it, especially if you rotational graze it, like the buffalo used to do when they, back with days. And so now you can run your cattle on CRP. And we have equip money to put fencing up, and it's the best thing we can do. We still have a struggle with haying it because of the limitation on wildlife nesting and so forth, and trying to open it up every year because of drought and so forth. But really the answer to CRP, it takes some of the edge off if you could just let the cattle people graze it. I went by the Hamden Slough yesterday, or the other day, and the Fish and Wildlife Service has probably 300 head of cattle out on the Hamden Slough on their Fish and Wildlife land. So they finally figured this out.
Good deal.
It's the best thing you could do with it. Yeah.
So just that's not all acres all the time.
No.
But there is some additional flexibility. So before you go home and do that, make sure and check with your FSA office on the ways.
We tried to make it all the time, Bill.
Yeah.
And in fact, it said that, I think, but then when they did the rules, they didn't do it that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe Stavidow stuck something in there I didn't know about.
I think whatever flexibilities we had, we used as much as we thought we had.
I understand. I keep
We
telling,
wanted more acres in to be able to be great.
I tell Bill and others, whenever I do a farm bill, by the time they got done with it, I did not recognize it.
We're running up against the clock. Collin, I'm curious with redistricting, were you surprised Minnesota didn't lose any seats?
Well, we've been through this the last 2 times, I think, that we were going to lose a seat. And, I didn't have any idea what was going to happen, but we just escaped by the skin of our teeth.
Right.
So we're just not growing. We got Florida and Texas and Arizona growing so fast that it's hard to keep up. Even we grew a little bit, but we didn't grow enough to keep up. But we survived.
Yeah, I was curious now how that went. Well, again, we are running up against the clock. We have another session coming up here on our stage in just a few moments. Again, Bill Northey from Iowa, the former Undersecretary of Agriculture, Collin Peterson from former Chairman of the House Agriculture Committee from Minnesota 7th. Please show your appreciation for their comments. You guys will be around for a few minutes if
Yeah, we're
folks
going to be
have
on
questions.
a little bit. You bet.
Well, again, we thank you for being a part of this, and again, we have another session coming up with Ag Country. Katie Tangen will be up on stage here in just a few moments. Thank you.